is fabulous.
Okay, folks, I think we're ready to begin here. Thank you so much for coming to L'Enfant Gallery of Georgetown for this special event. It's another edition of our L'Enfant Salons. It's a series of talks we've started holding, hopefully post-pandemic, but generally just wanting to re-engage with the community, with Georgetown, with DC, and with the wider arts and culture community here in the good old United States of America and beyond. My name is Brian Michael Smith. I work in curation and research and social media and sales and furniture moving and just about every other thing, but I'm just thrilled to have these special guests with us here today for a talk on the topic of Habsburg arts patronage from the 16th century today. Until today. Joining us is Felix Pfeifle, who did his Fulbright Scholarship in Vienna on the subject of Habsburg aesthetics. And thank you so much for being here, Felix. And joining us also, we're honored to have Princess Michaela von Habsburg, daughter of the last crown prince of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Dr. Otto von Habsburg, and a new friend of the gallery. And we're so thankful for you for being here. Let's give a warm welcome. And I would also like to introduce the true host of the evening, the owner of the gallery here, the inimitable Peter Colasante, and he'd like to say just a few remarks about the gallery and some things that we have going on here. So Peter, please.
Let me say it now?
Yes, please.
Okay. This is not on point for tonight's lecture, but it is on point for the world's activities. You may have noticed when you came in that there are a great number of landscape and colorful paintings hanging downstairs, and actually two up here. These are actually 2 of 61 works which have very recently come to us from Kyiv. We have embarked 2 weeks ago on a month-long, hopefully very successful fundraising effort in which we will be selling these 61 works of art, as well as posters and paraphernalia and catalogs, in order to raise money as a private initiative, which will go as much as we can direct it directly to people in need of operations, the men, women, and children that have been blown apart in this horrible war. So I would ask you, as conscious living people, when you're done, if you don't have time tonight, please come back and take a look. They're fabulous paintings. They're all from the collection of one major collector, Max, whose name I
Maxime Melnick of the Sophia A Gallery.
Who's also a publisher and bon vivant, and he is my correspondent in Ukraine. I'll just tell you, this is the propaganda part. This exhibition is going on for a month. It's a silent auction, so you can bid whatever you would like to bid on these things once a floor has been established. On the 14th of August, we're going to have a grand finale closing party and a live auction. Our hope is that we will be raising several $100,000. It's a big hill to climb, but Americans are generous, sometimes for the wrong reasons, but this is a great reason. There are, for each of you, and Brian, make sure you get them, invitations, which actually mention that the show has begun, and it does have a closing date. We're having a second of invitations come, which will specify more details about August the 14th. But that's the date to remember. Come and see the show, be regaled by what Ukraine looked like before this hideous things happened, and what we hope it will look like again. Two little things. There is also a statement of purpose, which I have written, which explains exactly what we're doing and why, and the fact that all of us in America should be part of this. We all can do something in some little tiny way. And my idea was, all giving is abstract. We have a great feeling, we want to do something, but it vanishes like the internet. This is a concrete living embodiment of this art and culture, so that if you give the money, you have something to remember it by, namely a painting, work, and art. So I will just leave these here to each. I would like each of you to take one of those. And last thing, there is a lovely catalog which we published of this show. We do not have enough available to give to everyone now, but they are available to be gone through when you look at the paintings. There's photographs of everything and biographies of all the artists. Many of these artists in this show are nationally known in the Ukraine and are in many museums there. So this is not just a group of Sunday painters. Last thing is, because I have to make a pitch. And if you don't make a pitch, nothing happens. Label does not belong here. This is a limited edition poster, which we have published for the event. It's a commemorative poster. And just like NPR, $25 you get a tote bag, $100 you get one of these, and $200 you get a catalog. But we're very happy for $5 or $10 or $15. We have a collection basket. Enjoy yourself, enjoy tonight, think about this, and come back for this show. Thanks.
Thank you.
So indeed, we do have a living embodiment, you might say, of one of the, I would say, most consequential families in world history. That's quite an honor, and we appreciate you being here. And to guide us through some of that history in terms of the art and the culture that the Habsburgs have brought into being in the world, we have wonderful Felix here to guide us through that. So without further ado, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Brian. And yeah, on that note of one of the most consequential families, I was just reading an article in The Guardian from a couple of years ago. In fact, touching upon your father's funeral. So a couple of years ago, that was 2011. But when he died, The Guardian reflected upon that and the ceremonies that surrounded his funeral, and they noted that the Habsburgs really shaped art and history in the last 500 years. And that only ended in 1918, but in my presentation we'll see how the Habsburgs are still active in the arts today, because it's a living organism, so to speak. It's a living dynamic, and just because the throne goes away, one doesn't give up every aspect of that way of life, so to speak. And so I'll go through some imagery here, and I'll just start by saying that to talk about the Habsburgs in the Renaissance we would talk about them in the Renaissance because that's when they really catapulted to the world stage. And that came through the inheritance of the Spanish throne, but that also meant the Burgundian and Dutch throne, so to speak. So they were ruling over the Netherlands and everything we associate with Luxembourg, Belgium, the Netherlands, Holland. They were ruling over Burgundy, Spain, and everything that Spain was exploring and conquering in the New World, in addition to the Holy Roman Empire. So it was the greatest breadth of the Habsburg Empire at that time, coupled with the age of exploration, coupled with the dawn of humanist thought and the perfection of the artists, or so I should say the mastery of artists in the pictorial arts. Because if we think about like medieval art, for instance, was not very pictorial. A lot of it was stone cut at best if it showed human figures, or they looked like stick figures in the illuminated manuscripts. but in sort of proceeding to humanist ideals, people became more concentrated on the human body and the human as part of the center of the universe, so to speak.
The Vitruvian man.
Yes, the Vitruvian man, but of course there was a kind of schizoid relationship with that, because, and for the Habsburgs there was too, because God was always supposed to be the center, and they maintained that through the Counter-Reformation, which was practically funded and led by the Habsburgs themselves and the Vatican. But so that you have God and man occupying similar stages, shall we say, and the Habsburgs coming into the apotheosis, so to speak, or the height of their power at the same time. So it was like a beautiful convergence of human events and cultural events that put them in a very special place at that time. And I characterize what they were doing then, and then what they did to the end of the empire. I wouldn't say they're doing it as much anymore, but is that in the Renaissance they were creating a theatrum mundi, a theater of the world. But it's really it's actually an art historical concept, but it's really a theater of the universe, not just the world. Mundi means of the world, but really it's the universe. And it sort of embodies something that Rudolf II himself wrote. Rudolf II was an emperor whose seat was in Prague. And it was this idea, and he and a couple of the other emperors really believed this, that every aspect of our lives, which seems so modern to me in a way, is a reflection of the universe. Distilled, every creature, everything was a distillation of the wider universe. So in this age of exploration and also great wealth, the Habsburgs in particular led the way in accumulating art and natural history collections that would reflect the entirety of the universe. So it was like this obsessive encyclopedic passion for the dynasty, but at the same time, the through line all the way through is that the Habsburgs are at the center of it. Make no mistake. Like they will be somewhere within the mix of representation. Whenever you're representing the world, it's like, here we are, and we're over here, and here we are again. And so what I've done is I've chosen some key images from the 16th century, the beginning of the Renaissance, so to speak. Well, the Renaissance was already happening in the 15th century in Italy, but it didn't really hit Habsburg lands till the 16th century, like 1500. But you know what? I think I have a surprising imagery for you too, because I don't think people realize, and I have to say, whenever I revisit it, even though I did my Fulbright scholarship on the topic, I'm always just I find it so refreshing. I'm like, wow, the Habsburg court or government at that time was so engaged with the leading artists of its time at the dawn of modernism, and you're going to see that representation, and they're doing it. I should also add, Michaela and I were talking about this the other day, the benefit of coming from a family that has been around for 800 years, 700 years or so, is that you have this incredible, toolbox from which to pull for every occasion. And I will be able to touch upon that. For instance, when her father died in 2011, there were about five major funerals throughout throughout Europe. And all the way through each ceremony, the family and those people organizing with the family are pulling from the toolbox of history and Habsburg symbolism and also religious symbolism to find meaning, as opposed to let us say, like a middle-class funeral in the suburbs, where it's just like you choose, you just choose your plan and you get your flowers or whatever, and they show up. So there's a lot of thought put into the Habsburg experience, shall we say, to this day. It's not on the same level as it once was, but it's still happening. Yes.
How about I invite Michaela to reflect on what you've said? Do you feel that that's a good characterization? What are your thoughts on that? This grand sweep of history that Felix has laid out for us.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting thought, and it's a very true thought, because you can find the Habsburgs everywhere, and it is an incredible honor to be born in that family and to be represented by history and art and politics up to our days. Like my father was, for me, the most incredible person that ever existed. And he was honored in Europe by 6 different funerals in different countries. And it's very true what Felix is saying, yes.
And I should further note, just to give you some context, the wider audience here, Michaela's father was the last crown prince, born in 1912, and so just he was 6 years old when the empire ended, but he's now more famous for having renounced his rights to the thrones of Austria and Hungary, and become a founding father, so to speak, of the European Union. He was an essential, and we're not to underemphasize that, an essential driving factor in the formation of the European Union, with a special emphasis regard to the former lands of the Habsburg Empire, because there was not a very strong interest in the countries that had been left behind in the Iron Curtain, and Otto von Habsburg was already a member of the European Parliament in the 1970s, an MP, and he made sure that they were not forgotten, and he became a liaison to them getting into the empire. And he's going to pop up in our imagery. He plays a role in some of our imagery here. But I do want to start, why don't we start with this magnificent cabinet, and I'll ask Peter to come over, because since Peter is our antiques expert,
Yes.
I can comment on it from a Habsburg perspective, but it has such a fascinating history. I think people should hear about that.
What is so special about this cabinet is that it's all out of one piece of wood, and like in my case, when you cannot see something, you can feel it. You can absolutely feel the art, feel the different sculptures and everything, which is fascinating in that piece.
Wonderful. Peter, would you like to give us a précis?
So it's pretty somewhat shorter than my. This is how this piece was created. This is a 17th century Renaissance form. This Habsburg crest, the double-headed eagle and crown, was carved in the 19th century, when this piece was meant to be sent to America to be put on display, so people would instantly know. They obviously, in this case, you'd have to know this battle and who the combatants were. And here, it's very simple. In the 19th century, a Habsburg piece. So there's the pure form of it.
It's, by the way, that's called help me, Maria, or Michelle. It's a bargueño. It's a type of, it's a very specific type of 17th century Spanish desk furniture. Bargueño. Bargueño. Okay. All right.
It's on our. It's a Viqueño.
Yeah, I passed it around. I found this piece in a neighbor's house in San Juan, Puerto Rico.
Wow.
I had a gallery down there about 20 years ago. This neighbor was no ordinary neighbor. He was a retired colonel of the Army, also known as Colonel Orange from Vietnam. And he was an inveterate collector and discoverer. His name was Robert Bartos, fascinating, one of the best bloggers in history. If you ever want to laugh, look at Bartos' blogs. Anyway, this was in his house, about 6 doors up from where I had my gallery. I went in one day, I saw it, I said, Bob, what is this? He said, oh, it's a story. I said, what story? He said, well, he said, I like to drive. This guy was a maniac. He would get on a road, anywhere, and drive until there was no more road. It didn't matter if it was 1,000, 3,000, 4,000 miles. And he lived in Alexandria, Virginia, before he went to San Juan, Puerto Rico. And one day he pointed north. And he drove for day after day after day after day. And he ended up in the last little tiny bit of Nova Scotia, where there's no road. There was just a lighthouse. And there was a storm, what you'd expect up there. You know, it's the middle of winter. And he made his way to the lighthouse, and they knocked on the door, and they opened the door, and this incredible thing was encased in glass at the foot of the lighthouse. So Robert, not being any ordinary sort of tourist, said, I must have this. And there's a sort of middle-aged guy there, and he says, this belongs to my family. It's been here over 100 years. Well, turns out in Nova Scotia, as in many places, it's a hereditary job. The same family had been lighthouse keepers forever. So he said, it's the strangest thing. He said, in 1892, my grandfather, who also was a carpenter in his spare time, was looking out at the horizon. The ship is going by in a huge storm, and then the next morning there was no ship, and there was debris this washed up on shore.
Oh my God.
Ostensibly, as we see it, because these are all the original pieces. Somehow it just plumped up on shore. It turns out that there was a ship that had left Spain, making its way to New York and then to Chicago for the Columbian Exposition, the first great World's Fair in 1892. And this was to be shown in the, we don't know if it's the Spanish or the Austrian exhibition. It never got there. Thank God for the U.S. Army. Bartos did not leave, and I didn't say this before, he wound up buying the lighthouse.
Oh, wow.
So he'd get this, and then he gave it back to Nova Scotia. He took it down to his home and also his antique gallery in San Juan, where it stayed until I found it. And I did the same thing he did. I did a dance, and I wouldn't leave his house until he sold it. That entailed drinking many, many, many gin and tonics with no tonic, with no ice. I sold it immediately to a museum in Virginia called the Liberty Heritage Society of Virginia, who the collection's in existence, the museum isn't, so we're now selling it for the museum. This is how things turn up in the world.
Yeah. We're Michaela and I are going to open the cabinet together since she's felt it out, so to speak, and we so you can see the interior. Go ahead, you can grab that. So, Nick, can you see that? Can you see it? Can you see it? So anyway, just it's beautiful.
Please feel free to step up and take a look. I think that's perfectly okay.
So I'll also show you I don't know if Peter mentioned this exactly. I think he did, but this was added to the piece. Yes, he did say that. And what it shows is the coat of arms of Charles V. So the Habsburgs at the very height of their power, and with the double-headed eagle of the Habsburgs, a motif, so to speak, a symbol of Habsburg grandeur that existed, shall I say, before the Romanovs had theirs. Sorry, Russians. And then surmounted by the imperial crown. Well, so I became confused about this piece when I brought Michaela to look at it, because I thought, how can this be a 17th century piece with the coat of arms of Charles V? That would make it a piece built before 1556, because that's when he died. Conceivably, not very often would people make furniture or art emblazoning them with the coat of arms of a former emperor. So this explains it, Peter. Thank you. So I'll put that back up. Yeah. I love this piece. In fact, probably eventually I'll buy it. Oh, can you do the imagery?
Can you describe more what it is used for?
It's a secretary, essentially.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
For a scribe, or yeah, not for a scribe. I take that back. Scribes worked in like scribe factories.
Too nice.
Yeah. Yes.
You said it's really a secretary, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
It looks smaller than any average secretary in terms of the size.
Well, possibly. But it is a writing desk. You know, you can fold that down as a writing desk, and that's what all those cupboards or drawers are for. And we believe, Peter believes, that a scene to depict a major battle over the Muslims in Sicily. And we will see some more related artwork, but like that. But I'll start here with a Dürer drawing. Albrecht Dürer was a great court. I mean, he was not a part of the Habsburg court, but he did some great commissions for the Habsburgs. And little known to most people because it's almost a very scholarly endeavor. He did this Triumphzug, which is a triumphal train, and designed a series of murals about 28 to 25 feet long. I think there were something like 20 of them murals that were supposed to be realized, depicting Habsburg glory in 1519. Now you have to, I want to back up. One of the things I have to say, it wasn't just that they're creating like a Teatro Mundi. Did I mention the part of the Habsburgs being the original masters of branding? I mean, essentially, when we talk about branding now, that's exactly what the Habsburgs were doing for 500 to 600 years. It was building a myth. Like to create aura, you have to build a myth, whether it's based on the truth or not. And so they built their own myth, and it started around that time. And what better way to do it than through the arts? And so this is just one of the murals. So if you can imagine, these horses are these. Oh yeah, how do I do that? Okay. I'm not sure I know how to. I just click it
scroll,
and then it
just
goes.
scroll. We are an antique store here, so
I'm one of the antiques.
all you
How do I?
press boom. Well, now there it goes.
Okay.
Split.
Well,
You
anyways,
can scroll.
if you can imagine
There we
such
go.
a fantastic, I might need your help.
Okay.
A fantastic creation. These like windows, these windows with sculptures in them borne aloft by horses, depicting different. This is Charlemagne here, Kaiser Karl der Große, or der Groß. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, so we're into the Titian masters, and Titian was a court painter of Charles V. So Charles V was both Holy Roman Emperor and King of Spain, and he was based in Spain. And then Titian was also in the court of Philip I. And see, I just want to, some of the subtle branding that the Habsburgs have always done in their art, and it's going to come up again, is you're going to see in all these portraits, obviously it's a portrait of Habsburg, right? You don't see any obvious Habsburg imagery, but if you look really closely, he's wearing the Order of the Golden Fleece. And so they're always, and I remember when I would meet with your father, he would have in his lapel, right here, what is that what it's called, a lapel? He would have a little button of the Golden Fleece, you know. And so it's just a really subtle reminder of exactly what, you know, the connection is. And so there's the Golden Fleece. Here, we don't see any, how beautiful is Isabella, his wife, Isabella of Portugal. We don't see any obvious iconography or crowns or anything like that, but what is on this curtain is a double-headed eagle embroidered into the curtains, or I guess, do you embroider into brocade, whatever that is? Well, we see the double-headed eagle, and it's going to show up again through this presentation.
Now just scroll
Oh,
other way.
okay.
There you go.
All right, and now this, of course, I think is known to everyone. This was Durer's portrait of Maximilian. Maximilian was the brother of Charles V. No, that was the grandfather of Charles V. The grandfather, and he's the one, Maximilian's the one who set up all the marriages whereby within 2 or 3 generations the Habsburgs practically ruled the world due to just some very convenient inheritances, shall we say. I love this portrait, so simple. He's wearing a fur, and you've got the double-headed eagle up there on the crest. Okay, and then this is Charles V, again by Titian, and his son Philip the
second.
Thank you, he was the second, you're right, because Charles's father was Philip I. And this is one of the most important paintings in the Renaissance entirely. This was a series of mythological paintings commissioned by Philip II from Titian, and this is Adonis and Venus. This series includes the Rape of Europa. I forget the other one's names. What I can say is that the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum just had an exhibition of all the paintings collected together, because Philip II, even though he commissioned them, he gave them out as gifts to other royal courts in Europe, and to my understanding, they had never been together since the Renaissance. And the Isabella Gardner Museum just brought them together last year. I missed the whole thing. I didn't even know about this. And they were all together. Well, when I read the review of that exhibition, it referred to the one that they have, the Rape of Europa, the Gardner Museum. And it was referred to as the most important painting of the Renaissance in the United States. And so there's a series of, I believe, 6 of those. And here, everyone knows this painting, Las Meninas. It is a bunch of Habsburg princesses with court dwarfs, so to speak, I guess they would be called. And then we have the image of Philip IV. I'm sorry, we are now in the 17th century with Velázquez. And we see Philip IV and his queen in the mirror there, and then the painter himself in the door back there. Philip IV, and that is Mariana of Austria, who I think she became a Spanish queen. Of course, the 2 houses, the Austrian branch and the Spanish branch, would only just marry each other and have children with each other. So they're going back and forth between between the two countries. More Velázquez paintings. Those are in Vienna. Now this is a fantastic display of the breadth of a Habsburg arts patronage by Bruegel, the elder, and he's showing the art gallery, so to speak, or the collection of the Archduke Albrecht and his wife Isabella. She was also a Habsburg, and they ruled the Spanish Netherlands. But what is so great about this is that it shows the variety. Most of this is like artwork. I guess they're mostly paintings. But what is starting to happen here, and this is like early 17th century, is the Habsburgs are becoming the leaders in a new way of collecting, and that is in this quest to sort of catalog in an encyclopedic way the universe, so to speak, natural phenomena and arts. They're creating these Wunderkabinetten, like wonder cabinets, what now are in like grandma's dining room, called a curio, right? Like, you know, that thing that you're like, you may not wanted to have kept after grandma died or something like that. Well, anyway, the curio comes from the Wunderkabinet that the Habsburgs started, and that becomes the very basis of the modern museum. The modern museum flowed out of this manner of collecting and cataloging. And so that's by Bruegel the Elder. And these now are Rubens portraits of Archduke Albrecht and his wife Isabella. Fantastic. And then I think that's also well known to many people. That's by he's a lesser known Dutch artist, but he is depicting it very similar to Bruegel. He's depicting the collection of the Archduke Leopold Wilhelm, who was then a succeeding governor of the Netherlands. And what is fascinating here is if you dive into this, there are major master paintings within it. Like there's also, I think the Rape of Europa is in there, and there are some Titians in the paintings. So that in itself is just a one. Here, this Titian. This Titian shows Jacopo Strada. Jacopo Strada was the Milanese antiquarian who advised the Habsburgs on their collecting. He was like the master, and his portrait is owned by the Frick now. Yeah, and we see it in there. 17th century, the Habsburgs still have, a magnificent collection of ivory sculptures. I mean, they are mind-blowing in Vienna because the Kunsthistorisches Museum, the Art Historical Museum, which is like Austria's Met Museum, that is the Habsburg art collection that the Emperor Franz Joseph opened to the public in the 19th century. And they have this magnificent collection of ivory sculptures here depicting Joseph defeating the Saracens, the Muslims, because that was, the existence of Europe was threatened by the Muslims, by the Ottoman Empire, up till 1683. And so all of this Baroque art is, celebrating the triumph over the Ottoman Empire. 18th century portrait of Maria Theresia, the mother of Marie Antoinette, and her massive family. This is also a little Habsburg triumph, so to speak, triumphant portrait, because the Habsburgs basically died out in the male line, and they almost went extinct entirely. And then she's portrayed here because of their interbreeding between the two branches, but she's got like 14 children. And in other words, they will survive. And this is the funerary art is a major part of Habsburg culture. then during the Empire and today, I would say. I don't mean like this very day, but you know, like Otto von Habsburg, that was like a very, very important part of the life experience of a Habsburg. And a lot of symbolism and honor and dignity goes into the art that is created for Habsburg funerals. And this is a portrait, 19th century, of Kaiser Franz. And people have said it's the first bourgeois portrait of a monarch. And the reason that they say it's so bourgeois is because he's facing the viewer directly, and he's so direct in his, you know, gaze of what his job is, so to speak. There's no doubting that he is in the occupation of emperoring, you know, of ruling. Whereas in previous portraits, they're more like looking away, or like they're in more dynamic poses, shall we say. There's no mistaking what he's doing right there. Now we're also in the 19th century still, and we've got the Winterhalter master portraits of Empress Elizabeth, known to especially Europeans who follow her cult, so to speak, of Sissi. She was the great beauty of the 19th century, and also the kind of Princess Diana of her time. She died tragically. And this shows Michaela's father, Otto, at home in front of one of the Winterhalter, a smaller Winterhalter portrait of Kaiser Elizabeth, Empress Elizabeth.
How did she die?
She was stabbed to death.
Yes,
Yeah.
with a
Yeah.
hairpin or something?
Something slight.
Something strange. A file.
A file. That's what it is.
Okay.
Yeah. A file, and the thing is,
File.
she didn't even know that she had been stabbed. Was the thing, because her, what do you call those things? The crinoline, or her
Corset.
her
The corset.
corset.
Yeah.
And she didn't realize, and she didn't even, I don't know that she even especially experienced pain, but she then suddenly just collapsed several
And
minutes
it
later.
was accidental. The guy who killed her wanted to kill somebody else.
Yes, exact. He was an Italian monarch, I'm sorry, anarchist in Geneva. So here, this is actually in my collection from a friend's grandfather who sent that postcard in 1908. So this is going to tie into this book that's on this table. Here we are in the 20th century, and there's no mistake that the Habsburgs are become great patrons of some of the most avant-garde artists of the early 20th century, the secessionists. So that includes Gustav Klimt. He did some major commissions for the Habsburgs, although I have to say not in the Jugendstil manner, in like that, you know, Germanic Art Nouveau. But look how wild that is. I mean, that's super cool. It's highly graphic. I mean, I'll just be plain about it. And so you have all this symbolism. You still have Emperor here. You still have the Schönbrunn Palace there, the Hofburg there. So the trappings of what the Habsburg brand are there. They're just being reconfigured. So the branding, it's like TW. Well, I guess that's not a good example. TWA went out of business. I don't know, Coca-Cola doing a new logo, right? Okay, go ahead. Now, this, you're really getting deep into these reimagined motifs of the Habsburgs that were already there. Can you see that this is another version, rendering of the double-headed eagle? This is the double-headed eagle spraying its wings all the way down. That's the tail. In this kind of almost perverse looking, but it's gorgeous, rendering of the Habsburg double-headed eagle. And here also you have the double-headed eagle and the lions of the original Habsburg coat of arms, but they're so abstract they almost look just like geometrics. And those are in my book here, which Michaela was able to feel the crown embossed on the cover here. And I got this when I was a student in Vienna. And it was an auction at the Dorotheum. And so here, I'll show you. So that's that. When you're looking. Can you see it? Yeah, you can come up and just don't touch the cover. I've already made it dirty enough. I mean, it's like, I'm not much of that great of an artist. But, here, I'll, yeah.
It looks very much Gustav Klimt.
Yeah, it is. It's very much in the style of, it's like an even more stylized Gustav Klimt. I'm going to get to the one I like the most for you. Where is it? Yeah. Well, it looks like it, but I don't think it is. And this is the breadth to which the Habsburg court spread their sort of revived brand in the early 20th century, which totally contradicts the idea of the Habsburgs presiding over a dissolving empire. This was made specifically for the same occasion, the 60th Jubilee of the Emperor Franz Joseph in 1908. This was for grammar school kids in Vienna. And this was, I got this from my landlady, who was born in 1900, and she was an 8-year-old girl in 1908, and I got that from her. Yeah, exactly, for the youth. And why don't we continue? Oh, now, look how wild these images are. This is you know, Michaela,
Yeah.
we're looking at right now the Kaiser Jubiläums Huldigungsfestung in Wien, the 12th of June, 1908. And what we're looking at really then, when we fast forward to something in her collection, is a Hundertwasser painting. It's like pre-psychedelic 1960s hippie, let's go on I don't know, a fun cruise kind of thing. Oh, let's go back. I want to show those stamps. Those stamps were actually designed, highly stylized. They're all so gorgeous and really fantastic. But now, you have to keep in mind, the Habsburgs were not private patrons of the secessionists. They were not private patrons, so to speak, of the leading artists of the time. But they knew that those artists were willing to support the dynasty and the unity of the culture of the empire by depicting them. And so they employed them. They didn't privately collect them, but they did employ them. And this is one of the most famous, Alma Schindler-Mahler, the wife of Gustav Mahler. That's her stepfather. So that's Koloman Moser. Now, here you have a portrait of a naked Josephine Baker in the center, who also was the photographer of the then Archduke Karl. Archduke Karl became the Emperor Karl, Michaela's grandfather. That is her father, Otto, as a boy, as a little boy. That's his sister, Adelheid. And this marvelously handsome portrait of Karl as a young man. But that woman who photographed those, she went on to be a celebrated photographer among other avant-garde artists. She kind of had a pen name or whatever one calls that, Madame Dora, and she was very much an artist photographer. She became famous for photographing other artists, but some of her first portraits were of the Habsburgs. And then this is really kitschy. I mean, this is not an advancement in like art and the development of art, but it is pretty. And it's interesting because that is the Crown Prince Otto as a 4-year-old boy at the coronation of his parents in 1916 in Budapest. They had a coronation in Budapest, but not in Vienna. Well, I mean, I've always, because I knew Otto, and I mean, and to think that Michaela's father is that boy
Right.
in that scene, that like in her father's lifetime they had scenes like that, is like when we think of like the progressive trajectory of what we believe history to be like, you know, that we didn't have such things, that the world was already modern at that time. No, they were still having coronations just the way they had been doing them 500 years before. And that's also part of the a Habsburg
But
aesthetic.
it's interesting that since it was during World War I, that they would it have been scaled down, do you know, the coronation?
Yeah. It was very scaled down. In fact, Michaela, do you remember some of those details of the coronation? How like they just did it so quickly, I believe.
Yes, I remember the scene when my grandfather had to, was on a horse,
Yes.
and he had to gallop up a mountain 3 times.
Yeah.
And the horse stalled at the 3rd time, and he had to redo the whole thing. But that was part of the coronation that was always depicted in these old black and white movies that they have this the photography. So yeah,
Yeah.
but it was still a magnificent ceremony, even if it was scaled down.
And from what I understand, her grandparents, the new king and queen, did not attend any of the court balls, and they returned immediately to Vienna
Yeah.
to observe some of the. I think all the aristocrats stayed for the balls, but the royal couple returned with her father and his sister, and he must have had Robert must have been born at that time. So now we're still in the 20th century. We're in the psychedelic 60s, and which I find this image especially like that one from Franz Josef's celebration of his Jubilee. But this is Michaela's, because she was a friend of the great artist Hundertwasser.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us about Hundertwasser? He was Austrian.
He was Austrian, and he was a big friend of my father's. He came to our house a lot of times, and I befriended him. And my father did no art from one thing to another. He had nothing to do with art, but he was always saying how incredible everything was, and then he had no idea what he was looking at because he was only interested in politics and in the European Parliament and what was going on in our days. But Ernst Fuchs and Friedensreich Hundertwasser both became very good friends of his, and I got this. It's the greenhouse, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I got this painting. I inherited this painting, which is an original which my father got as a present from Friedensreich Hundertwasser, who lived for the 80 years or 75 years that he lived nude on a boat. And it was called the Reagan time. And he painted always in the nude. So when he came to our house and he wanted to paint my father said, and he wanted of course to undress like
Oh my
that.
gosh, really?
Yeah, my father kind of stopped him, and I don't know what happened then because the kids were sent outside. But
The would-be emperor told him to put on clothes.
yes,
That might be what happened.
Yeah.
It was a thin line.
Were you not a guest on his boat?
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And
Yeah.
well, anyhow, he did not create any Habsburg specific imagery that I'm aware of, but we've included that because it's hers and it's one of her most prized possessions, and because I think the sense of imagery and graphic quality ties into that Jugendstil painting from earlier in the century. Now we're in the 21st century, and the continued activity of the Habsburgs in the arts comes through Michaela's former sister-in-law, Francesca von Habsburg, also known as Francesca Thyssen. And Francesca married Michaela's brother, who is now the head of the House of Habsburg, and she is because when I lived in LA, I was very involved with the whole art circuit and everything, and all the really avid collectors and their influence in pushing the newest art and patronizing the newest art. By no doubt, or stretch of the imagination, or exaggeration, is Francesca one of the foremost collectors in the world right now. And she mostly collects installation art, or rather, I should say, she doesn't collect it because you can't really own it. You can't like own that room, but she commissions it. It is possible then that, you know, because she's the mother of the children in the main line, that is the senior branch of the house now. And you have to keep in mind, there are like 1,000 Habsburgs, but this is the head of the house. And so Francesca's collection conceivably could go to them and continue as a Habsburg legacy. And after all, Habsburgs tend to know what to do with artistic and cultural legacies, since they've been doing it for about 500 years. Now, I find this very interesting because it's a kind of full circle. This is an installation she commissioned by the great artist Olafur Eliasson, an avant-garde Icelandic artist, and this is called Double Baroque. And this was staged in the Prince Eugen Palace, which the Habsburgs owned for about 300 years. And so it's a Habsburg commissioning this avant-garde installation throughout this palace. And he's done all these fascinating lights throughout the palace, doubling the sense of Baroque, like in the more avant-garde manner, and then just to highlight its architecture. Now, the final piece here is that this is not just patronage, but it's the activity of Habsburgs in the arts. And this is the work of Michaela's sister, Gabriella, and she's actually, she's kind of like her father, but then she's also an artist. She was also very political. She was the ambassador from
Georgia
to Germany. Yeah. She was the ambassador, and she also taught, I think, art in Georgia. In Georgia. I meant to invite the ambassador today too, and I kept forgetting. But because I met him at a party, and he's a nice guy, and he likes your sister. He knows her really well. Anyway, this is a sculpture she did in I can't remember which city, but it's magnificent. She's what we call like a constructivist, geometric modernist, so to speak. She designs very much in the manner of the way she was taught in Munich in the 1970s, when modernism, this kind of modernism was more prevalent, and she's never abandoned that manner of creating. This is very symbolic. This is a monument to the picnic at Sopron, Hungary, which her father, Michaela's father, led at the end, that was October of 1989, and Otto von Habsburg arranged a picnic at the border between Austria and Hungary, and it literally became, and people finally, didn't really acknowledge it at the time, but like after he died, then they really started acknowledging, yeah, this actually did open the Iron Curtain. It was one of the most symbolic blows to the Iron Curtain because they opened it up and everyone went running through the border. And this is Gabriella's monument, and it's about 30 feet high. And then we're going to end it with her father, Otto von Habsburg, and Habsburg symbolism and how it persists. And that is that historically, I showed you that no one does a funeral better than a Habsburg. And historically, they also would have their hearts removed. And that was not just the Habsburgs. That was typical of ruling aristocrats, to have your heart removed and your entrails at times, and sent to another part of lands you ruled that are meaningful to you, so that you could kind of be in depth in each part of your lands, so to speak. And so the Habsburgs have a whole crypt in Vienna, separate from the imperial crypt, with just the hearts. Well, when Otto died, he had his heart removed and sent to one of the first which is one of the first monasteries in Hungary. It is like, it's symbolic of the Hungarian nation, that very monastery. And his heart is in here, and that was designed by and sculpted by Gabriella, and it obviously makes reference to his accomplishment at Sopron as a great European in helping the Hungarians in need in 1981. And so that's that.
Covered a lot of ground, Felix.
Yes.
That was actually my rough draft. He saw me this morning. I almost had a nervous breakdown because I couldn't load my real presentation. So that's the small prep. Maybe it worked out for all of you that you didn't get to see that.
But I would like to, before we take some questions, but Michaela, tell us about your experience growing up and your relationship to art, and what moves you about art, and what just tell us a little bit about yourself and what your experience was growing up in this family.
I think when you are born a princess or born in this kind of family, you don't think that you are so different, and you are not, of course, but it's compared to when you marry into a family.
Mm-hmm.
And we were educated in a villa in Höcking, which was near Munich in Germany, since we couldn't go to Austria. We were exile Austrians. So we had a passport that was an Austrian passport that told you for all the countries in the world but Austria. And with those passports we were traveling. And till 69, till my father resigned, and we all were allowed to go back to Austria. And we were homeschooled, and we had friends from other aristocratic families, but we could not really mix with the kids in, if you want, neighborhoods and so on. And then in the villa that I grew up, we had a lot of very famous paintings of Winterhalter, of Stieler, and it was kind of huge painting of my grandfather and all kinds of different paintings, and then a couple of Hundertwassers which my father or my mother maybe put up to please Mr. Hundertwasser when he came, and then we were changing those out. So my father, as I said before, was not the most interested in art, but he was very well educated, and he pleased everybody by enjoying it and by
praising it
and everything. But he was more interested in us knowing about world politics. And we had a rule, we had to listen every day to 3 times 20 minutes of news. Once in French, once in English, and once in German.
I think I'm going to try that with my children.
Yes.
See how that works out.
Till we went to boarding schools, and then all of us went into their different directions. But it was an incredibly upbringing, and I'm very glad that I learned all these languages, and that my big interest is politics, and I can't exactly watch television, but I can listen to the television, and I have the news on for 24 hours when I'm at home.
I might add, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't your father's favorite kind of music jazz? Was it?
It was jazz, and then it was the Song Blue of
By Neil Diamond.
Yeah. That is he's an unsung American artist, indeed. But that's really interesting, and thank you so much for sharing.
You're very
And
welcome.
being here, and tell us, what are you up to today? What are your passions, your projects, and what occupies your
Well,
time?
Funny enough, I became a master photographer, which you wouldn't believe now, but that was my passion, that was my upbringing, and I travel. I absolutely adore to travel, and I lived in various parts of the world for quite a while, till I am now residing in Spain, which I adore as a country, in the south of Barcelona. And now that I lost my eyesight, it is interesting because I could see, not extremely well, but I could see before I lost my eyesight, so I can remember, I know all the colors, I remember all the places I've been to. And now I'm enjoying my incredible children, of whom one of them is here, Mark, and I have two other children who are living in Barcelona. Plus, I got a brand new grandchild, which is my first grandchild, which I'm very happy about. Yes.
The lady can give it around.
Yeah.
Felix, is there anything you'd like to add, or subtract, perhaps?
No, I don't think so.
Tell us what you think of the United States. How about
I
that?
adore the United States. I lived in Manhattan for quite a while, and Mark was born in Panama, in the Republic of Panama, but my other children were born in New York, in Manhattan, and I was very lucky because my third child, my son, was born in the 25th week, and he was only 750 grams. And he stayed 5 months in Lenox Hill Hospital, but he survived, and he just did his PhD in research ophthalmology. Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. Well, do we have any questions from the? Can we open it up, or?
Yes.
Or Michaela, is there anything else you'd like to share about Felix's presentation? It was really fascinating.
It's fascinating. I think it's very interesting. It's not many people that can explain it as well as Felix does. And I think most of you saw the movie, which became the Felix Austria movie that Felix did. And he is incredible, and I don't know anybody else who is such a Habsburg expert as Felix is.
Well, that's a
Yeah.
endorsement there for
Yes,
Felix.
absolutely.
Let's give Felix another round of applause.
Yeah.
And perhaps, are there any questions, or we could take it downstairs to have some drinks and some food, or if there's anyone who'd just like to ask a question? Bernie, yes, please.
It is very interesting to listen to this presentation because it's a lot of beauty and art and history. You lived long life to see another time, another epoch, another epoch.
Yeah.
How do you feel about this world which lacks lots of aestheticism and it's not very beautiful world these days? Generally speaking, the fashion, but your family was kind of avant-garde at the same time. You opened up in the beginning of the 20th century. How do you feel about that?
Well, it's difficult to say because it is such a difference in this world since the time I grew up. I'm 68 years old now, so it has changed so much, and you don't really know what's going to happen tomorrow or in the next couple of days. In my youth, it was a little different because somehow we were stable and we were in this private environment, and we had this incredible upbringing, and now it's an insecure world and we don't know what's going to happen. So I think it's interesting, it's exciting in a way, but it's also very, very sad.
I can say that I suffer daily from this bestial lack of aesthetic qualities in 21st century culture, but I accept it nonetheless.
Yes, you have to.
And I can say, you know, I moved here from Los Angeles, and one reason that I decided to stay is it's so much, I feel so much more at home in the beauty of Washington, D.C., and how pristine the monuments are, and so many of the buildings that surround us, and also the gardens. There's so much more excellence, I would say, in the way this environment is created than in any other American city. I think, to me, it embodies some of the best qualities of great European cities than any other American city, and that's why I decided to stay here.
Yeah, it's very exciting.
Yeah.
I do happen to say that I really kind of like I was actually very how to say this, astonished that the family are really patrons of art, and of course I was wondering if you have your view on the art world today.
Oh, is that for the princess or me?
For you.
Oh,
Well, actually, for both. In case I was actually wondering.
Yes.
oh. Well, I will say that I will say one aspect of the Habsburg involvement in art I have always appreciated, because there came a schism, so to speak, or there was a great change in the way art was created and acquired in the 19th century, and now that dynamic has picked up. And the Habsburg way of creating or commissioning art is that it's a reflection of the rituals of life, so to speak. It's a reflection of where one is in the world and what one does. And if you need, you know, a table for your sofa, you go to your nearest craftsman or whatever, and you have that appropriate table made. Now we live in a consumer culture where even the rich, which, by the way, I've done a lot of, I was trained as an architect and worked in that manner for 20 years and have done a lot of interior design. And it became very challenging for me when you go to IKEA. And I should say, I think, you know, it occurs to me recently, I went to Hillwood for the first time. That's a very different universe. That's a universe of acquiring art. It's all about the acquisition. There's no symbiotic or organic connection to the art or the artifacts in the house and the life of that actual household and the woman who lived there. Now, granted, she had great taste, and I'm glad that she was able to salvage and save a lot of those works of art from Russia. But the American way, the bourgeois way, the modern way of being with art is to acquire it. What I like about the Habsburg way is it, to me, is a more holistic experience. It's a more organic experience. You involve art in the way you live. It's an artful way of living. And I think that every person from every walk of society can live that way within the scale of whatever that person can afford.
How do you compare them to the Medicis?
Well, you know, so I almost, remember I told you I got into an argument on the phone the other day with a Fulbright Scholar of my friend who stayed in Austria, and she was saying, it's okay. You know, she was questioning. I was positing the Habsburgs as the single most influential family in the history of Western art. Single most. Well, partly by way of their longevity. The Medici, you have to keep in mind, they came and went in a 200-year period. So what I would say about that is that they were